text recordings, and so I'm not sure what that's about. So we're doing a double recording here today. So, all right, it's getting connected. I think we are now connected and recording. So, very good. All right, so today we're just going to cover a lot of ground. We're going to take a wide sweep on animal IDing and what that um, looks like, or where we're at. Um, if you have questions, and that's really what we want to be able to do, is cover what questions might come up, and so I'm going to guess on the questions. But if you have other questions, definitely use the chat pod in the lower right part of your screen. If you don't see the chat pod, you should have the ability to turn it on and or maximize it. So play around with the controls over there till you get the chat pod if you need it or want it. All right, so first of all, market beef IDing, and that is happening right now. And so I want to take a quick look at that, a very, very quick look at that. And so I'm going to share my screen out and see what happens there. All right. So when you are, I'm going to go back to the county perspective here, and it's thinking on that. Take just a minute. All right, so I am in the county profile. I'm in Zarlog County. When you're doing market animals, when you're IDing any kind of animals, when you're doing almost anything with any kind of animals, go through the animals tab, and you'll see that in instructions, and I'll respond sometimes in emails or chatted questions, those kinds of things. What I mean by that is that when you're into your 4-H Online, and I'll see if I can make this a little bit bigger here. You also should be able to make this bigger on your computer as well using WebEx. You go normally in through the enrollment screen and then the search tab, and then you find a member and you click on login and you get to that member profile, and then that was an archived member. Sorry about that. Normally I'll look a little closer and I'll get a youth. All right, so normally what you do when you go in and you're on the search screen or on the profile screen, there's this animals livestock menu item up at the top. This is what the family sees, and you can go in here and do some animal things, but sooner or later you're going to get frustrated because it's not going to let you do everything that you need to be able to do. So much better, as a staff person, use the animals tab up at the top. That's going to give you greater functionality, greater access, better controls to doing the kinds of things you need to do as a staff. So from this animal screen, when it comes to adding market animals, if you're in a county where you're collecting that or you're getting forms mailed in or however they land on your desk, when you need to work with those market beef and to get them in here, or if you're getting breeding beef or whatever, go in through this animals tab. What you'll do is you will find the members. So maybe you'll if you clear filters on this animal screen, you'll see all your county members. You can search for them using keywords, and then you'll go into select a member, and then you'll add an animal there. And by adding the animal here, again, you're just going to get greater functionality and doing more things with it. All right. Beyond that, the other thing to be aware of is the page where all that information is. So on the YD intranet, there is, under Delivering Youth Programs and Science of Ag, there's an animal ID process and information for staff. So this is where you're going to find all the things like the 4-H Online User Guide we're going to look at in a little bit, the ear tag stuff that should all be very common and familiar, and then all the support pieces and information you need. This should all be old news. Market beef and dairy steers, that should all be out the door, but in case not, or if you have questions, here's where you can get that and work on that. All right, just one last reminder in terms of working with market beef, and this applies to all the market animals and a lot of the breeding animals. Keep track of those ear tags. As many of you found out last year, the Board of Animal Health does spot check those ear tag numbers, and so make sure that you're keeping track of them. All right, So that's it on that. Again, unless there's questions, and I'll get back to WebEx somehow and see what's happening there, if there's any questions. All right, seeing no questions about that. All right, um, so the user guide has been updated. It's not posted online, but this is usually where I debut those user guide updates, and so that's again the case today. So as of today, there's a new page in the user guide for Animal ID by staff. So this is a user guide. So at this point, you all should be seeing that user guide uploaded as a document inside WebEx, not my shared screen. I'm trying a different technique. We'll see if you like it or not. You should be able to scroll through the pages yourself using the little navigation button at the top of the document. That should be open to you. I'm going to move us to page 7. This is the new page that's been added, and so this will get uploaded sometime today. Carryover animals and uploaded files. One of the things that we struggled with was the files that were specific to a year, and mostly we're talking about lease agreements other than dairy. So those are files that didn't have any value in this year. In other species, you can't use and you can't and you don't need last year's lease agreements. And so they were still on the screen, and that was confusing. They didn't need to be there, and we didn't have a way to do anything other than just say, don't do anything with them. One of the things that happened this week is we can now archive those files. And so there's two kinds of files in dairy animals, and I think, can I do this? I want to see if I can annotate here. Yeah, maybe not the best color. I'm just playing a little bit here with WebEx. All right, so we're talking about your neutral files and your specific files. And that's somewhat generic, and that's intentional because this is a user guide. I'm going to share my screen out again and show you the list of files in 4-H Online and what that looks like. I need to, can I move that? I can move that. All right. All right, this next screen is not a screen that you're able to see, and so I hesitate a little bit because I don't want to confuse you, but it is maybe helpful to see the entire list of what's going on here. All right, so this is what's called the upload alias list, and this is where we set up the file uploads that show up on the different animal types. This green check mark over here are those files that are archived, and so you'll see that the files that are archived are all 20, like 2013, that old dairy form that was previous part of the paper upload system. That's now archived. There's no reason to upload that again, and there shouldn't be any reason this year for the families to need that. Now, if they need it, we'll talk about how to get at it. The breeding heifer lease agreement, the calf registration paper for a cow-calf pair. If you bring forward a cow-calf pair, it's going to have a new calf. The cow information stays the same, but the calf is going to be new. Lease agreements, the dairy goat ID form, those sorts of things are what are now archived. So these no longer show up for the family in 4-H Online on that animal profile page. Everything else is there and showing up like it should. So these are all the file uploads that are showing up. Dairy is different, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. So what that means is that if you need to get at those files, there is still a way to do that. So for the most part, they're gone. It's kind of like in 4-H Online. If you archive a member, for the most part, that's like deleting them. They're just kind of gone, and they don't get into the normal flow of things, at least not very well. It's the same for these animal upload files. And so I'm going to show you then. Again, this is one of those things you have to go through the Animals tab to get to that. So if you go in through the Animals tab and go find an animal, and I'm going to do that. And So here, for example, and I had to go into the actual real estate data because our test data didn't have anything that showed up here, but this John Altendorf from Goodhue County with a dairy animal. If we go look at that animal, now this is an animal that was carried forward, and so there's the ID information. Now we're in here as staff, we've gone in through the animals tab, and so we can edit this data. We can change this if something needs to be changed. I'll show you in a minute what the families see. And then we can upload these files, and so there's the dairy registration paper. There's the 2014 dairy lease if they need to use that, and again we'll get to dairy in just a minute. The dairy photo, the animal, that's not going to change. If they want to put a new photo up, they can. And then the 2015 lease if that's applicable. But below that is a new section called Archived Files. And so what this is the file name. And so what it is this is the old dairy ID form that is now archived. You can't do anything with it, but you can download it. Again, this is only available to you as staff, but it's how you're going to get at those archived files if for some reason you need to get at them. So that is that's about it. That's the new piece. It's these year neutral files and it's the year specific files, and it really depends, or it really dictates or shows up as those files being visible or not, or where they're visible. Now for families or for dairy. That's where it gets a little more complicated because of this first freshening rule. Families cannot edit a carryover animal. So if I go into, and I think I still have this, all right, so this is, and I'll make it a little bit bigger here. This is Daisy Seaver in our test family of Zarlog, and this is a dairy animal that was carried forward. So again, I'm logged in here as the family, as the member, and you'll see that I can't, as the member, change anything. The data is just there. It's read only. Same way with the documents. It's only for downloading. You can't upload new stuff. This is carryover animals. That's, again, because these carryover animals, they have to be ID'd and they can't be reassigned, and so we've locked it down for the family. Now, because dairy requires that lease to be renewed every year, there has to be a way of doing that. And actually, let me refresh this screen. As I was playing with this, I need to give you the updated. All right.
Todd, we can't see your screen.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I do that a lot, don't I? All right. So I'm logged in here as Daisy Seaver. I've logged in as the family. This is the animal profile page. Looks the same except that the fields are read-only. There's no way to click in there and change that. Down at the bottom, the documents and images, same way. You can't do anything except download what's there. And so that's what needs to happen. In this case, we don't have a good example because we don't have a 2014 dairy lease because this animal wasn't leased in 2014. But if the animal was leased in 2014, there would be a PDF icon right here, or in some cases a photo icon. Doesn't matter. But the family would need to, as it says here, if leasing again in 2015, click to download, then renew and submit to the county. And so that's the process that needs to happen. And it's a pain and it stinks and it's a bugaboo. I mean, I wish it wasn't the way that it is because it's not real handy. We had to lock the entire animal profile because of the dairy first freshening rule. So what's going to happen is that the families will download their lease, or if they come into the office or if they request, you as staff can go in here and download this 2014 lease, print it off. They then need to sign it, take it to the animal owner, and they need to sign it. If they're changing the arrangements or the terms of the lease, that needs to be on there, those kinds of things. But it has to be the last year's lease and then renewed for this year and then uploaded under the 2015 upload or file upload module or block, or I guess whatever you're going to call this. So this is the family's view. They're going to download, if they have it, the 2014 dairy lease. They need to send it to you at the county, and then you as staff need to upload it because you families can't do that. So we'll pop back here to the staff side. So what I just did is I went back in. I'm in here as staff. This is what you would see. It's a different animal, but you can see how you can edit the fields and then you can upload the new document. So that's the overview of how the dairy stuff is going to happen. There was a question on the chat, and we've talked about it a lot about the dairy emails. There's going to be as Karen mentions, there's going to be an email that's being sent to the dairy families, and I think if I switch back, I'm still playing with WebEx here a little bit. You should now be seeing the user guide. So Judy's question, she's asking about what you should be seeing. You should be seeing the user guide. I just flipped to that. This is what I just talked about, that the family needs to download the previous year's lease agreement, or you as staff need to download it, give it to the family. They then need to update it, and then it needs to be gotten back to the county office. A scanned copy is okay. If they want to do that, that's fine, that's acceptable, and then you as staff need to upload it. So that's where we're at with that. Now, the dairy email, the communications that's going to go out today from Karen. You should now be seeing this dairy email. This is still, I think it's final. It's still being reviewed yet by a staff member, one of the dairy educators or core animal science team members. Marcia Woosty is going to look at it, as well as Becky Harrington, I believe. But this is the email that's going to go out. And so just again, to reinforce the kinds of things we talked about, this is a reminder to dairy families that the animals must be owned and ID'd and or leased before the first freshening. And if it's a first calf heifer, that also needs to be done before they calve. That's not new, it's just a reminder. Everything else for dairy animals must be done by May 15th. And then that information is yet to come from your county office. The ID letters, the county ID letters, are also being reviewed and finalized. Lease agreements, again, that's kind of where the rub is, and that is unfortunately more difficult than it should be, but it is what it is, at least for this year. So if they're being leased, it needs to be redone. So to renew leases, and this is going to families, they'll need to get last year's agreement either downloaded or to get a copy from the extension office. They need to get the signatures, update the agreement, and then get it back to the extension office. And so it's just reminders about that. The deadline is May 15th, except for those meeting criteria number 1 above, which is the first freshening. And then it talks about the reassigning or sharing, or not sharing, but transferring or reassigning an animal to another family member. And we talked about that, and I wasn't sure if we'd have time. We do have time, so we're going to talk about that for the rest of our time today, unless they are other questions coming up. The question about the email. So there's a question about, will it be going to families who've not yet re-enrolled? And yes, that's true. That should be true of all your communications going out, and that's the way we're doing it at state as well. Because there is no deadline, or there's no winter deadline for re-enrollment, that re-enrollment deadline really comes May 15th with the animal ID deadline, those kinds of things. We're still sending to, as you should be sending to, those who have not yet re-enrolled, unless they've told you that they don't want to re-enroll, and then you move them to archived or not participating. So yes, like you should be doing that. Will you get a copy of the email that's being sent to the families? Yes, that will be sent to all staff as well. Should counties mail last year's dairy lease forms to families? I'm not quite sure. There's a couple ways you could read that question. Should you print out everybody's dairy lease forms and send them to everybody in your county? We're not saying that. That might make sense. I guess that's kind of a local decision. But you can mail them out. I don't know if that's the question, but if a family calls and says we can't get them online, can you mail them out? Yes, you can do that from the county office. I would tend to hesitate of sending them out to everybody. Um, and then just to go back to the question about emailing to inactive members, those who have not yet re-enrolled, by sending to inactive members, just to clarify, that's only those who were active in 2014. Um, so we're not going to send to kids who were in the dairy project in 2013. It'll just be those in 2014. So it'll go to both project members and adult volunteers who are enrolled in the dairy project either last year or this year. That'll be the recipients of that. Um, so, good questions. Anything else at any point? All right. So let's review again the transferring of animals from one family member to another. So you've got a family member that graduates out of 4-H and they had identified some animals and didn't show those animals. They can be transferred to siblings. And the process for doing that is in the user guide. So I'm flipping back now to the user guide tab, and hopefully that's happening for you as well. This was a new page, page 7. If we go back a page, and we'll go back up here just a little bit. So we're talking about reactivating animals and bringing forward animals, the first freshening rule. So kind of get where we are at the process. You need to first activate the animal, bring them forward, and then we can start moving them. So if you need to change the associated member on a carried over animal, that can be complicated, and we're still kind of getting it fine-tuned the process, but here's kind of what we're doing. First, you need to find the animal, because if you know it's in the family and there's multiple family members, you could have to go through a lot of clicks to try to find that animal. The best thing that we're doing or suggesting is that you would use the county fair check-in report from last year. Even if that animal didn't show up at the county fair, which has to be the case in order for it to be moved to a sibling, that county fair check-in report should have all the animals that were identified last year. So that would be the place. It's easier on a printed report than online to find the animal under whose profile it is, especially if that member has graduated and has now been archived or indicated not participating. It's easier to look up on that county fair check-in report. That's also going to be the report that will tell you whether or not that animal was shown this past year at your county fair and by who, which is another important piece of information to know as you embark on this process. Once you've found the animal, you then need to activate the animal, which in most cases is not going to be terribly hard. Unless the member is archived, you're going to have to unarchive the member and then change the animal and go through that process that's detailed here. Once it's available, you can reactivate it, and you can kind of go back and forth with activating, check the animal, is it the right one, not, put it back, those kinds of things. Just a word on that we're finding that if you activate an animal and then move it to a different member and then you try to unactivate it or delete it as a current animal, it can disappear. Now there's been variable results. In some cases it seems like that animal disappears altogether. In other cases we've been able to get it back. But once you've changed an animal, it gets kind of funky because now that animal, that record is not part of the new member because they didn't ID it last year, so it's not going to show up for them as a carryover animal anymore. But the original member, it's not part of their current record, so it gets kind of funky. So within a member, you can activate, unactivate, activate, actually it's deleting, back and forth as much as you want. That seems to work fine. Once you've moved it, then it's probably better to leave it alone. And keep in mind that unless there's some reason it's out of compliance of the animal science rules, it's okay to have extra animals in there in that profile. They're not going to hurt anything in there, even if they're never shown. It's better to have the animal in there than not. Finally, once you've done that, you can move the animal. Now, the hard part is that you have to move it to an active member. And so that's where this re-enrollment stuff comes in. For those that are getting that animal, if you found out they're getting that animal, um, they need to be actively enrolled. They have to have submitted their re-enrollment. In most cases, that's a great opportunity to say to the family, hey, if you want this to happen, you need to get that member re-enrolled. Now, if you're doing this proactively after your county fair, it's not too bad after your county fair. Post rollover, like we are right now, it's not very handy at all. And in some cases, you may need to, temporarily activate the member and then move them back. You'll kind of have to manage that, whether it makes sense to contact the family and say, hey, get re-enrolled so we can do this. This is one of those tasks that we're asking you to work on this winter. I think we had a January deadline when we were in the webinar about getting this cleaned up. Next year, we'll push harder to make that happen before rollover, so sometime after your county fair. Get those animals moved based on who showed at the county fair. This year, it's definitely more work. Uh, all right, I think that's it on that. The user guide has details, and the animal ID page and the dairy information sheet has lots of information about what can and can't happen. There's a question: can a prospect calf be activated to a breeding heifer, or does it have to be re-entered? Um, you cannot switch animal types. And we saw that last year that because the fields are different, the questions are different, and that maybe not drastically different, but because they can potentially be very different, it is not possible to switch an animal from one animal type to another, whether we're talking carryover or within the current year. So a prospect calf last year, and if it's now a breeding heifer, it needs to be re-entered as a new animal. There's no way to carry that information forward. It would be nice, but it's not an option. So those need to be carried forward. Um, yeah, good questions. All right, I think that's about it. We're just about out of time. If there's other questions, I'll hang out on chat for a while. Otherwise, that is it for today. So have a good day. Thank you.